What is up, everybody? Welcome into this Q&A pack-a-day post-game Lions chat. I don't even have anywhere to begin, so I'm just going to open questions up. I will answer as best I can. Obviously, I haven't had a chance to rewatch the game, but the first watch was about as abysmal and brutal as you could possibly be. This is the Green Bay Packers that we've basically seen for the entirety of this season, even when they've won a few games, besides the Bears game, which they certainly had some positives to take away from that. This has been the same Packers team that we've seen all season long. And I thought we saw a lot more of it. And I think for anyone that was hoping that this would be a shot in the arm or a spark or the kickstart that this team needed, it was very clearly not that. They had the opportunities to maybe get that in the first half if they can convert in the red zone. But this Packers team, the thing that they do best is beat themselves. They beat themselves insanely in this game. I mean, poor throws, opportunities to hit deep shots down the field, penalties at inopportune times. I mean, just some of the classics, right? Like not tackling a squib kick to open the game that gets returned to like the 35-yard line. Running into the kicker when the guy like brutally misses an extra point that should, could have potentially changed things in this game as well. Having an opportunity to win the game at the end and just shot play. Like it's just all the things that we've seen all season long. So yeah, if you guys have questions, if anyone, obviously, if you do a super chat, I will put it to the top of the list. And otherwise, I'm just going to go through and kind of answer questions, like I said, as best as I can. All right. So Oba, let's start with you. Why is everyone complaining? Clearly, we're tanking for a fourth rounder with our first pick in the draft. All right, Oba, maybe I should have started with that one, but not clearly tanking, although maybe they should have tried to tank because they haven't been successful at anything all season. So if they would have tried to tank, maybe they'd actually be winning football games. I say in jest. But yeah, this is obviously, if people are uncomfortable with it's time to, like with people who are like looking at tanking games for better draft picks. I'm not saying that's what Green Bay should do at this point, and they certainly will not do that knowing the Green Bay Packers, but those conversations will certainly start to take place. Kevin said, should have started the rebuild after the 2021 season. Yeah, they should have. I was very clear on my preference for that. I think the worst thing that you can do as a franchise is try to keep a window open too long. And let me start again, and I've said this in the past and I'll say it again. I totally get it. I totally understand it. There is usually a safety valve that comes with having an MVP quarterback on your team. You're usually going to get to the playoffs almost no matter what, which gives you a lot of longevity in this league. It gives you opportunities to win Super Bowls. And there could have been a situation, let's say the Packers did the Denver Bronco trade, right? And they trade Aaron Rodgers to the Broncos. While I don't think this would have been the case, what happens if Rodgers goes to Denver, tears it up, and has another MVP season? Meanwhile, the Packers struggle from there on out. There's always going to be a question of, man, could we have maybe kept that window open 1 or 2 more years and tried one more shot at a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers? So it's definitely a damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of situation. But it's why when Ted Thompson made the decision to trade Aaron Rodgers, this is not the benefit, or trade Brett Favre, excuse me, and this is not a hindsight is 2020. I said this at the time. I didn't know if it was going to work out. In fact, I probably was thinking that it wouldn't work out at the time. But man, did I respect the balls that man had to make that decision at that time and to trade away Brett Favre, knowing that he was going to be the ultimate villain in Green Bay for doing so. Simply because he had a belief that it would work, and doing it before things got worse, and having a quarterback in Aaron Rodgers and trying to open that new window. And it paid off with the Super Bowl victory in 2010. This could have gone in a variety of shitty directions, no matter what Green Bay did. They could have traded away Rodgers and just, it could take a decade or two to find your next quarterback. Like that's legitimately a possibility. And you go, another decade or two, without having a legitimate chance at winning a Super Bowl. And they could have had major regrets that they didn't try to keep it open for 1 or 2 more years. But at the time, I said it in the offseason, I thought it was the right move to make had Denver offered that same trade. And it sounds by all reports that the Broncos wanted Rodgers. And then once Rodgers said he was returning to Green Bay is when they pivoted to Seattle and Russell Wilson. So you'd think that if they had a preference for Rodgers, they probably would have at minimum given the same deal that they gave to Seattle. I think I think that would have been the best opportunity at the time. And it would have given Green Bay an opportunity to sort of supercharge their next window. They clearly would not have been good this year, no matter what. They are going to end up likely with a top 10 pick. Maybe that would have been a top 5, top 3 had they not had Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. That gives you the opportunity to see a full season of Jordan Love at quarterback and see if he's the future, if he's the next guy. And if he's not, then you have a top 3 pick probably to play with and potentially draft a quarterback. So like I said, I think that would have potentially supercharged the rebuild process, but I totally understand wanting to try to keep it open for one more year, but just know that if it doesn't work out, if you borrow a ton of money from the future and you go all in for one more season and it, backfires disastrously in your face, this is what's going to happen. Now, potentially they could get a little bit lucky, and maybe lucky is the wrong word. I don't think this is what anyone was expecting, but if they do have a top 5, top 8 pick, and right now I think Matt Schneiderman tweeted that this is the 8th overall pick in the draft that they would have if the season ended today, that would give you some ammunition, top 8 pick. And then that's the 39th pick would be in the second round because the Dolphins don't have a first round pick because they got it taken away. That gives you a couple top 40 picks to go out and try to improve this team, or maybe make a bunch of trades to get a bunch of picks to bring in some young talent. But, you're looking at a really tough stretch for Green Bay this season and going forward. There is no easy answer. And Green Bay's going to have to look themselves in the mirror and really, really, truly decide what they want to do moving forward, because with Rodgers at quarterback, there could very well be, the powers that be in Green Bay look at things and are like, there's no opportunity to win with Rodgers in Green Bay. The salary cap is too tight. We can't go out and spend players. They're going to have to gut. If Rodgers stays or goes, they're going to have to gut a good portion of this team just to make things work anyway. There's always borrowing from the future, but at what point does that just become, a bigger issue than actually trying to go for it another season? I mean, I don't think anyone can look themselves in the eye right now and be like, hey, I think the best thing for next season is to go all in again. That just doesn't seem like the smartest decision. So how those conversations go with Rodgers, what decisions they make from here on out, what point this season, if the Packers are eliminated from playoff contention, if they want to get a look at Jordan Love, those are all going to be very extremely difficult conversations that the Packers are going to have to look in the mirror and have with themselves, because there is no easy solution. Listen, I know I tweeted it out, but benching Rodgers that's not easy. That can go a lot of really wrong ways too. So we'll see what happens. But yes, I think it is fair to say, I said it at the time, and I think clearly now with the benefit of hindsight, rebuilding after 2021 was the right way to go. All right. Sumarian, let me just get your super chat here. Thanks so much for chatting in. Really appreciate that. As Rodgers hijacked the offense, this doesn't look like Matt LaFleur's offense. Looks like the 2017 offense. I don't think hijacked is the right word. I would agree with you 1,000,000% that this looks nothing like the, Matt LaFleur 2020 offense. I really struggle to try to figure out why. I literally don't know. Part of it is poor offensive line play and just searching for answers. And I thought the offensive line, and again, I'll rewatch it and watch the all 22 with, way too much of a fine eye this week. But I do think the offensive line at first glance today looked like they played pretty well specifically in the passing game. Run blocking was not good, but I know the Lions were sort of stacking the box at times as well. But I think through times this season, they're playing without the needed pieces along the offensive line, which it's a force multiplier. If your offensive line's not blocking well, it makes everyone look bad. It makes your running back look bad, even though Jones looked really good, even in those situations. But it makes your quarterback look bad. It makes your receivers look bad. So it just is a force multiplier. So I think Matt LaFleur is realizing that he doesn't have the weapons down the field to stretch the field, and he's trying a horizontal passing attack to try to stretch the field horizontally. That's not working. They probably need to run the ball more, but they haven't had consistency with it, and teams are daring them to pass the ball, and it makes that difficult. I think we can look at this offense and say that it's broken, right? But the question is why, and the question is, I guess, better, what can they do to fix it? And trust me when I say there's no answer. You can run Aaron Jones more. I think that would be a nice start. But like, look what Jones and Dillon did in the running game. Like they couldn't get the running game going at all. I think it was like 20 carries for 50 some yards for the running backs in this game. If Matt LaFleur ran those guys 40 times in this game, you would, and they got, 90 yards or some crap, like you'd be like, why are they not throwing the ball with Aaron Rodgers? So what I've said this before, and I'll go on a quick recap of it, but what you're seeing from teams, sometimes they're playing cover 2, sometimes they're playing cover 1, but they're going press man on the outside, and they're usually putting another player in the box, so making it an 8-man box, so it's not an advantageous run situation. And, single high, deep safety, everyone pressed on the outside, and they're flooding the middle of the field, which Rodgers basically ignores anyway. So a defense can't be perfect, right? There's no perfect defense. Something is always going to be open. What is open against other teams, or what other teams are daring the Packers offense to do, is attack to the deep outsides of the field. And we saw a couple today, like Allen Lazard had a couple opportunities and some things like that, but Green Bay can't do it consistently enough to make defenses get out of that particular defense. And they can't burn opposing defenses on it enough to make them pay. So the defenses are saying, you're not going to run on us because we're going to put 8 guys in the box, or we're going to have a advantageous run defense situation for us. We're going to make sure the middle of the field is flooded so you can't attack that. We're going to be pressed up against the line of scrimmage. So if you want to do any of the quick horizontal stuff, that's there because our guys are pressed up right at the line of scrimmage. We've got a safety deep just in case something does hit, so make sure that you're not going to get in the end zone from it. Your red zone offense is terrible. Your third down offense is terrible. Your fourth down offense is terrible. You won't stick with Aaron Jones even if we give you a 2 shell. Even if we give you 2 safeties back, you're not sticking with the run enough. So defenses are daring the Packers to be able to beat them deep down the field to the sideline. So, when Rodgers is saying, like, let me go down swinging, let me go down throwing the football, we can't survive any other way, to some extent he's right. But at the same token, they've had opportunities all season long to beat that coverage and to make defenses get out of that coverage, and they just can't do it. And clearly injuries apart, Romeo Doubs going down this week, Christian Watson going down last week, Randall Cobb being hurt, Sammy Watkins being hurt, like those injuries, Allen Lazard being hurt, all of those injuries aren't helping anything. But I don't think there's anyone that would be arguing, hey, even if they had a full, deck at wide receiver, like this team would be ready to take the top off of opposing defenses. They just don't have those guys. And that is just one. And I mean, just one of the problems for the Green Bay Packers. So to answer your question again, Samirian, I don't think Rodgers has hijacked the offense. I don't think this offense is the Matt LaFleur version we saw in 2020, which was a better version of this. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there's issues with the offense. The question is, what can you do to fix it? And there is no good answer with this roster and with this team, the way that it's constructed right now. And that's GM, that's coach, that's Rodgers, that's offensive line, that's players, that's everyone. There's, as much as there's no easy answer on how to fix it, there's no easy finger to point to and be like, it's just this person at fault. It's all of it. Everything has gone like that can go bad, has gone bad basically this season. I think the most frustrating part of this game is like just when anything goes right. Like I was so excited for the Samori Toure catch, like where he made the insane adjustment to the ball on 4th down and he comes down with the catch and it's like, okay, like no matter what happens, like we can talk about Samori Toure and some of the really awesome stuff that he's doing. And he comes down with the ball and on his way down, he fumbles. It's like, even when we have just a little thing we can sink our teeth into as a positive, oh, it's actually a fumble. And it ended up being Packers ball. So I guess no harm, no foul at the time. But like even the good things that you can point to in this game, like Jair, great interception. And like 3 plays later, we throw it right back to the other team. Like, those are the sort of things where like Green Bay just can't get out of their own way. For every step they take forward, for every something that they give you to separate, like to celebrate, like 5 things immediately go wrong right after that. Any realistic way? Hey James, how's it going? Any realistic way that Love gets on the field? I think the first step would have to be they'd be eliminated from playoff contention, unless Rodgers' thumb is like just beyond repair and they actually have to do something this week. Barring an injury, I think they'd have to get eliminated from playoff contention first. And then I think it would probably be something where Rodgers and the Packers came to like some mutual, like, hey, I'm going to get a procedure done to my thumb, which is going to shut me down for the remainder of the season. So it's not a benching. It's more of an injury. Why put Rodgers at more risk in a season that no longer matters? And I think that probably comes even not only after they're eliminated, but probably more with like 2 games, maybe 3 games, maybe 1 game left in the season. But I think if we're just all of a sudden hoping for Jordan Love, or if anyone's hoping for Jordan Love this week, next week, the following week, anything like that, it's probably going to be at minimum until, again, barring a major injury to Rodgers. I think it's going to be the first part of the conversation will be once they're eliminated from the playoffs. Let's see here. All right. Brandon says, I want to know your take on the last series of downs, please. Andy, 50 seconds, 2 timeouts, absolutely horrible play calling. Please help me understand. This is one I'm going to have to go back and look at, not to sound like Matt LaFleur here, but I don't know what the concepts were on the play at first glance. Matt LaFleur said that it wasn't the goal to just take 4 shots into the end zone. Clearly they had everything at their disposal. I think what I'm more frustrated with at first glance is like the confusion, like the play clock running down to no time left. And just like all of it was a mess, right? This is your opportunity to go win a game in Detroit, to like at least save your season for the time being. And there's still miscommunications and guys running in and off the field. The play clock probably should have been to the point where they actually got a delay of game penalty on almost 2 different occasions. Like, man, that's like, I can't tell you how much practice that those situations get. You do 2-minute drills every single week, off season, in season. Like, those situations are drilled to death. And you have a quarterback that's gone through those situations hundreds of times, and knows the 2-minute offense in and out. And you're having miscommunications and errors and issues, and like, it's all around bad right now. Like I said, we can point to everything. We can point to how this team was constructed. We can point to how this team is being coached. We can point to the scheme. We can point to the defensive coordinator that was hired. We can, look at the players that decide they still don't want to tackle using their arms. We can talk about players making stupid penalties. We can talk about players not being put in a situation to succeed. Aaron Jones still not getting the ball. There is a laundry list of items that we can go over and over and over and over. But to point to one thing, I think the thing that's tougher, and I know that sometimes, an Aaron Rodgers will overcome a lot, clearly, and especially when he's playing at an MVP level for back-to-back seasons, but it's not like this is a 4-year failing regime, right? This is a GM in Brad Gutekunst that has consistently found hidden. I know the draft, we're going to talk a lot about the draft in the next couple of years and Goody's draft over the last few seasons. Some key misses, players aren't getting better. I'm probably going to talk about that very, very soon on an upcoming show, but we'll definitely talk about that. But he's also found guys like Rasul Douglas, Devondre Campbell on a minimum deal. There have been a lot of real positives that Gutekunst has done. And I'm not saying it's clean. It's not. There's a lot of issues as well, but there's a lot of things that are good. And last year, if you would have told me that team that was constructed, if they stayed healthy last year, that roster was stacked last season. And it just didn't work out. That's tough to blame on Goody. That roster was insane. Devontae Adams, Darius Smith, Whitney Merciless, a bunch of guys that unfortunately got hurt at times. David Bakhtiari not being there, Elton Jenkins not being there at the end. That roster was so freaking good at the end of last season, especially in that playoff game when guys were starting to get healthy, but they couldn't put it together, and special teams was still an unmitigated nightmare, and it cost them. But Goody has done a lot of good things over the last few seasons that led to 3 straight 13-win seasons and opportunities with teams that could have theoretically won Super Bowls. So you can't just point to all of a sudden now Goody's just the worst. There was a lot of good. On the same token, Matt LaFleur, right? This isn't a 4-year failing regime. This is 3 years of 13-win football that got to the playoffs every year, that barely lost, never won back-to-back, or never lost back-to-back games, and now has lost 5 games in a row. So it's tough to be well, LaFleur sucks. Well, he clearly didn't suck for the last 3 seasons. So there's just a lot of bad on this team right now. And I'll say it again, there's no easy solution. There's no easy finger to point. It's all of it. It is literally all of it. All right, let's go. I know I got a couple more super chats here. All right. So Joe, is Aaron Rodgers' contract even tradable? It's a really weird contract, first of all. So Rodgers this offseason is going to have to decide if he wants to come back and play football again. And then what he does the remainder of the season and how good he looks or how bad he looks the remainder of the season is going to be a huge part of that as well. But if he decides he wants to come back and play another season, there will be some team, even if he looks awful the remainder of the season, which I don't think is going to be the case, there will be some team that talks themselves into, this is Aaron Rodgers. We're just an Aaron Rodgers away, and we think we can win the Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. So I think they could, like, I don't think it's going to be something exorbitant like we saw the potential Broncos deal and what they did for Russell Wilson this past season, but tradable in some capacity with some return on it, probably, but just probably not what you would hope or expect, at least going into this season. All right, let's see what else we got here. Thanks again. Thanks for all of these. Really appreciate it. Steely Phil, is Matt LaFleur the guy? Really doubting it? I want to think so. I really want to think so. I really like so much of the stuff that he did the last few seasons, and it's harder at this point to point to a lot of the stuff that's going on and at least not question Matt LaFleur in some capacity. I love how he takes accountability. I love how he ran the offense for the last 3 seasons. There's so much to love about what he did in his first 3 seasons in Green Bay, that to just nuke that entirely and be like, man, yeah, now he sucks. It's really hard to do that. And I know we all, myself included, get to be prisoners of the moment and really focused in on what's happening right now. And listen, right now is really, really bad. It is really, really bad. And it's fair to ask the question. But I also think that not only is he deserving the remainder of this season to see how he responds to this season, he clearly is not on the hot seat in any capacity and deserves another season to see what what this team can look like and how he can get this turned around. But I think for the first time in Matt LaFleur era, there are questions to his coaching prowess and what he can do to overcome adversity, because he hasn't faced adversity. And I've mentioned this in the past as well. When your only adversity hits in the last 3 years when they lost in a playoff game, in some way that it almost makes it easier. Like, you really never have to face that adversity because you lose in the playoff game, and then there's a whole off season and a bunch of new players come in and you turn the page, you have a draft, and everything, you have so much time between the end of last season and the following September, that you never actually have to look that adversity in the face and face it. And the only times he's faced adversity really were the 3 playoff losses, and you immediately turn the page after that. So this is the first time that we've really had the opportunity to see Matt LaFleur and this Packers team face adversity in the Matt LaFleur era. And so far, it's gone as bad as you could possibly imagine, with 5 consecutive losses, including a loss to the Detroit Lions, one of only 2 teams in the NFC who had a worse record than the Packers going into this game, in a absolute, no doubt about it, lead pipe must-win game, and they can't get out of their own way. The line, kudos, if we want to give kudos to Dan Campbell and the Lions, be my guest. The Packers beat themselves in this game, 1,000,000%. The Packers unequivocally beat themselves. The most damning thing of this entire game is that the Lions didn't even play well. This Lions team, who is one of the worst, absolute worst teams in football, played a bad football game, didn't even play a good football game, probably not even a mediocre football game. They played a bad football game, made an atrocious decision to go for it on 4th down to give Green Bay a chance at the end of the game. And the Packers still could not get out of their own way to win that football game. That is by far and away the most damning part of this entire game. Joseph, I appreciate the super chat. I'm scared. Me too, Joseph. We are in uncharted, unfamiliar territory. And like I said a couple weeks ago, if you were just good every single season and you were given a Super Bowl every single season, yeah, there's certainly a lot of fun that would come with that. But the journey is fun too. And sometimes it's the pain that makes the antithesis of pain, the opposite of pain, the joy, the jubilation, the wins, the triumphs, that much sweeter. And right now, Green Bay's going through the churn, and they've got to figure out a way to get out of it. But as a fan, you still enjoy every little piece of the process. You look for guys like Kingsley and Igbari, which was stupid freaking penalty, like hitting him in the helmet as he's going for the tackle, and Jared Goff's head goes down and he ends up getting hit in the helmet. Give me a break. But Igbari's making a new play every week. Samari Toure is making a new play every given week. We'll look for the small wins, and we hope that eventually over time that those small wins amount to something that they can be a tangible, big win for this Packers team moving forward. So yeah, it's not a great time, but we'll look for the little stuff and we'll enjoy the process along the way. All right. I should probably read these before just posting these live, but looking at the Rams, Broncos, Bengals, 49ers offenses not being as good as expected, do you think the offense is figured out? How do we adjust? Well, the Bengals put up I think Joe Mixon had 5 touchdowns, 4 in the first half today. But I do know what you're saying. The McVay, Shanahan, Hackett, LaFleur, Taylor, etc. tree, not exactly lighting, the world on fire right now. I always think there's like when the Packers hired Dom Capers to do the 3-4, I was always a little scared because it was like you could tell like 3-4 was getting super in vogue at the time. It was like they were coming in at the end of it. And thankfully, they had a couple seasons of really good 3-4 defense left before all the offenses had figured it out at that point, and they were able to get a Super Bowl out of it, in part because they had Nick Collins, Clay Matthews, Charles Woodson, Tramon Williams, Sam Shields, Colin Jenkins, BJ Raji, Desmond Bishop, Nick Barnett, et cetera, et cetera. When you have a defense that talented, that's certainly going to help things out. But they luckily got a Super Bowl with it, but like you could tell like they were late to the party. And then like once you enter that party late, then everyone's figured it out. Like now you just hired your coordinator. So like, and now this defense is no longer in vogue, and now everyone's going to something different. And it's like, all right, we were late to the party. And thankfully in that situation, like I said, they got the Super Bowl out of it, so it didn't really matter, but they were late to the 3-4 at that point. It didn't cost them. It cost them eventually, but not when it mattered most. And then like with this, like you could tell this, McVay, Shanahan system, like you could tell it was extremely in vogue, but now as soon as everyone starts to run it, then all defense is just like, oh, all right, well, we basically only have, one key offense that we really need to shut down and study. So we'll make sure we can stop that. And then some other offense will pick up. And we're seeing now a lot of the teams like the Eagles, the Ravens at times look okay doing it, but the teams that can consistently run the football and do some, and really keep teams off balance are the teams that are having a lot of success. And then a bunch of those coaches will get hired, and then that will go out of vogue. So it's all cyclical. And as soon as something picks up enough popularity where too many teams are doing it, defenses are just going to figure it out, and then offenses are going to have to readapt. And clearly right now, specifically with the Packers, they've been really struggling to readapt and figure out a way to run this offense in a very successful way. All right, Preston, thanks so much for the chat. If we miss the playoffs, do you think the decision to not trade Rodgers will be on or near the level of drafting Tony Mandrich? I think the first thing, as easy as it is for me to say in front of a keyboard and a camera, that, they easily should have traded Aaron Rodgers. Again, easy for me to say. We don't know exactly the conversations that took place. If those conversations did took place, maybe the Broncos and other teams were lowballing the Packers. Maybe they're saying like, hey, we're going to give Russell Wilson a deal, like a huge trade, because he's 31 years old, or 31, 32, 33, whatever the heck he is. Rodgers is literally threatening to retire any offseason. So we're not going to give you a bounty of picks and players because we might only get them for 1 year. So we don't know the conversations that took place and what compensation was maybe offered. I tend to believe that the Broncos and Hackett probably would have given the Russell Wilson deal to Green Bay had they wanted it, but we don't know for sure. The other thing is that there has to be a partner at quarterback to go along with this. And while I tend to believe that Rodgers would have said, yes, I'll go play with Nathaniel Hackett in Denver, and maybe even a part of him wished he could have done that, we don't know. Maybe Rodgers would have said, you know what, I'm either going to retire a Packer, after we, take one more stab at it, or I'm going to retire a Packer now. I'm not going to go and start up fresh with another team. Maybe that was another conversation, and we don't know. And again, I tend not to believe that, but at this point, we just don't have enough information of, was there a legitimate offer? Did Green Bay legitimately consider it? Was Rodgers a willing partner? Because again, if they trade him and then he says, no, I'm not going to go to that team, I'm just going to retire, it's all a moot point, right? So while, and I'll say it one more time, I believe that Rodgers probably would have gone to Denver, and I believe that Denver probably would have given the Russell Wilson trade, and I believe that the Packers made a mistake in doing so. We just don't know enough to know exactly what happened in that situation, at least at this point. Maybe I'm sure there will be books written and future stories given in the account of what happened in this past offseason, especially with Davante Adams moving on to the Raiders. Like, that is a franchise-altering offseason in a million different ways. And clearly the Davante Adams trade and the Rodgers non-trade are the biggest pieces of that. But there's so much that went on this past offseason that will be talked about for as long as we're probably on this earth when it comes to Packers fandom. All right. Thanks again, Preston. Jonathan, I recall in the offseason, Matt LaFleur wasn't pleased with the conditioning, how much the injuries is conditioning versus bad luck. Your guess is as good as mine, Jonathan. And I wish I had a better answer to that. I thought actually through the first, 6-7 games of the season, they suffered some injuries, but it wasn't, for the most part, it wasn't to the key guys that you were really expecting. Now, Jenkins and Bakhtiari transitioning back from injury, and Bakhtiari going in and out of the lineup, and Jenkins going in and out of the lineup, that stuff is tough. But we knew that there was going to be a reacclimation period. We didn't have any guarantees on if Bakhtiari would even play. And Jenkins probably came back sooner than I think expected, maybe to the detriment at times. But overall, I think when you look at the first, when the season was actually in the balance, this team wasn't that beat up. I think Bill Huber put an article out there this week as well that if you compare it, and I know at one point, through week 4 or 5, this Packers team had at least in regards to starting players, had less, time lost to injuries than just about, I think, they were in the lower tier of teams for players lost due to injury. Now, this game, holy crap. You want to talk about injury to insult. This is the epitome of that, right? Jones goes down, Gary goes down, Watson goes down, Dobbs goes down, Runyon goes down for a little bit, Stokes goes down, and Barnes goes down, and Campbell was already out. That it was brutal, right? So yeah, the injuries are piling up, but when the season was actually in the balance and mattered earlier this year, they had most of their guys at their disposal, and it still wasn't good enough. So I don't know that we can blame it on conditioning or anything else, but and let's just be real. That's part of the NFL. This is a war of attrition every single year. You're going to lose super important guys to your cause, and you've got to have guys that are ready to step up. And for all the things that we thought this team was going to be really good with the starters on this team, the one thing that we did know was a serious issue at a lot of positions was depth. And that is certainly now coming to fruition, where the depth on this team is just not that great. And I actually think some of the depth is actually a little bit better than expected. The Rudy Fords, the Keyshawn Nixons, some of those type of players. I think we've seen a Samori Toure step up when needed. Some of the depth is actually better, but it's still not to the level that it needs to be, clearly. Ryan, thanks so much for the chat here. I don't want to talk about next season already, but where do they even go from here? Cap will be a problem next year too. Just hope Rodgers comes back and everyone progresses majorly next year. I'd actually go in the opposite direction, Ryan. I think we're at the point, and I hope I'm wrong. Hot takes exposed. Feel free to, or old takes exposed, I guess. Feel free to, clip this in the future. I think we're at the point where things are going to have to get a lot worse before they can get a lot better. I think they're going to have to take their medicine with all the money that they borrowed from future salary caps. The Rodgers deal is going to end up looking like an absolute nightmare, whether, he retires or they have to release him or trade him to kind of start fresh. They're going to have to move on from a ton of these veterans in this offseason, whether they move forward with Rodgers or not. And, one of the things about Goody and the general in the front office, I'll put it that way, is that when they took over for Ted Thompson, they got to have their fun, right? What they did at first, because Thompson didn't spend any money. So he got to take over and realize hey, Thompson never borrowed money from future salary caps. They had a ton of salary cap space going into that, into those next couple seasons. He got to go write a ton of checks for Preston Smith, Za'Darius Smith, Adrian Amos, Billy Turner, Jimmy Graham. He got to go all out and spend a ton of money. Mercedes Lewis to a lesser extent. That's the easy part of being a GM. Plus he had top 15 picks because they traded out and then back up, but top 15 picks to help get Jair Alexander and Rashawn Gary. That's the easy part of being GM. If you're going to pick early in the draft and have, a ton of, top picks to play with and a ton of money to spend, you or I, or most people should be able to put a fairly competent team together when you've already got an MVP caliber quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, who, to be fair, had not been playing that way up until Matt LaFleur, came in and started turning things around. But you've got an MVP caliber quarterback. You had a lot of really key players like Devontae Adams, David Bakhtiari, Aaron Jones, Kenny Clark, just to name a few that were already on this team from Ted Thompson. And then you come and take over and have a ton of money to spend and, basically back-to-back years with top 20 picks. That's the easy part of being GM. Now is the tough part. You spent all the money, the credit card's maxed out. Your players that were good from the Ted Thompson era are getting older, and you don't have many places to turn, and you will have probably a top pick again this upcoming season, and you're going to have to make the most of it. But this is going to be a much more difficult off seasons over probably the next couple of years to navigate for Brian Gutekunst, and he's going to have to do it with near perfection if he wants to get these things right and this ship turned around sooner rather than later, because what they've done to this team to borrow from the future and watch some of these players get a little bit older and have some of the younger players that we're expecting to take their places not progress as expected. Like I said, I think unfortunately things are probably going to have to get worse before they get better, and very much hope that I'm wrong in saying that. Wait a minute. You're saying Rodgers trade is a possibility? I'm not saying anything like it. I'm just saying, like, I don't think he has no value. I don't think this offseason, I think if this offseason, and again, the contract is super prohibitive. Like, you probably want to wait till after June 1st, which no team is really going to want to do. Like, it's insanely, and like, that's an understatement. It's insanely complicated. I'm just saying, I don't think it's a complete impossibility that something probably could work out. And I do think, like, even no matter how bad the season goes, I do think Rodgers has some value in some capacity, but you would basically have to decide that you are going complete nuclear rebuild mode, which I've seen no willingness from the Packers in any capacity to ever go in that direction, because they're going to eat a ton of salary cap by trading him. And they're going to have to nuke a bunch of other players just to put in a Rodgers nuclear salary cap when he's not even on the team. They would have to go extremely nuclear to go in that direction. So I don't think it's likely, I guess is probably the better way to put it. Possible, maybe slightly, ever so slightly possible. All right. Let's see. Joe, Goody and Matt LaFleur are safe through at least 2023, right? Yeah, they're not going anywhere this offseason unless something insane happens. Like, we would probably be having to talk about them losing every game for the remainder of the season before anything even gets discussed. And even then, I think at that point, you're talking about scapegoats. You probably fire a Joe Barry and, make a couple other changes and decide to nuke the team. And I think they probably go in that direction first before they just go full nuclear, especially with new contracts signed recently for Matt LaFleur and Goody. So they're safe, I think, for the season. The only thing that could change that would literally be losing out for the remainder of the season. And then that would very much, I think, at least be in the conversation. And even then, I think it probably doesn't happen. All right. This one, I like this one, Gary. The salary cap's not real. People need to swallow their tongues. Anyone who ever said the salary cap is not real is just, you're not looking at it. Like, there are always there's always money in the banana stand sort of way of thinking of things. There is a level of truth to that. But think of it this way. You, as a team in 2020, borrowed a ton of money from 2021 and 2022 and 2023. And then in 2021, you borrow from 2022 and 2023. And then in 2022, you borrow from 23 and 24. All of a sudden you get to 23 and 24 and all of your salary cap. And then the thinking clearly for the people who are like, well, the salary cap's not real. When you get to 23, you can borrow from 24 and 25. When you get to 24, you can borrow from 25 and 26 and 27 and so on. And you can just kind of keep moving kicking the can down the road. And to some extent, that's true. However, what you're not considering is the fact that there are teams in 2020, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022 that didn't borrow from the future. So they have all the mechanisms available to them where they can borrow from future caps, and they have carryover from previous caps, and they have salary cap space from this cap. So they're operating in like a totally different salary cap stratosphere to you. So while yes, you can still borrow from the future, so can the teams that didn't borrow anything from their current salary cap and actually had carryover salary cap from previous seasons. And now they have a crap ton of money to spend, and you have like 200 million less to spend in salary cap than they do. So while you can keep the team together and kick things down the road, and there is absolutely a truth to that, you're still borrowing operating at a massive net negative to the handful of teams that didn't do that and are now going all in on those seasons because they've got a young quarterback and are super talented. And we're seeing, the Buffalo Billses of the world and those sort of teams come up because they didn't pay a ton of money in past salary caps. Now they can borrow from the future and spend now and have a great quarterback. And then that's how teams, have the opportunity to win now and again, operate at a level that Green Bay can't because they borrowed so much from future salary caps already. So yes, I hate the banana stand line. Me too, James. I apologize for using it. But hopefully I explained it well enough to make people understand why it doesn't exactly work that way. All right, let's take a couple more there. Let's see here. Appreciate everyone, by the way. 373 people in here. That is amazing. Let's see. Anyone else have anything that they really want to get to? Derek says we need to draft a wide receiver in the first round. Like, I promise you, Derek, by the time next season comes around, this will probably be at the point where you have to do best player available all over again, because you just have to take really good football players. They can't miss. And I'm going to do a video this week, I think, that's going to explain things to a great extent and why Green Bay needs to change their philosophy on things, because I do think their philosophy is broken and I don't think it's appropriate anymore for 2022. So quick teaser for a video that's going to come out later this week. Appreciate you, New York Cheesehead. Hit that like button. Hopefully we can get some more people in here. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate this. Listen, I love talking Packers. I love talking Packers if they are 0-17. I love talking Packers if they're 17-0. Like I said earlier, I enjoy the journey no matter what. I've been blessed and lucky enough to see 2 Super Bowls in my lifetime. I certainly wish it was more. But I've got to see 2 Super Bowl teams, and I love this team and this franchise so much no matter what, that for me, it's about the journey, and it's about seeing how this team can hopefully put the right pieces together to be successful down the road. And things have gone wrong and things are not great at the moment, but it doesn't change the fact that I love this team. I love cheering for this team. I love talking about this team. So I'm glad it's therapeutic, but and it's therapeutic for me too, but I still love talking about the Green Bay Packers. All right, Steely, appreciate this. You're a good egg, Andy. Thank you for all you do. Not sure about that first part, but I appreciate that, and you are more than welcome. All right, I'm going to log off at 4:30. So if you guys want to get any final questions, and you've got about 3 more minutes, and I'll try to answer any more. Let's see here. All right, actually, no, we'll end with this one. All right. 17 years of play, 5 straight losses, and now Aaron is trash. Come on, pay some respect. So I'm assuming, Art Ashes, that this is in regards to my tweet today. So let me see if I can pull it up really quick, because I do want to talk about this. And first of all, I will say prisoner of the moment, maybe a little bit, and human, emotion in the moment, probably. Can I probably be a little bit better in that regards? Maybe, probably. But let's see, where was the tweet? So I said, Matt LaFleur, this was after Rodgers' 3rd pick. He had also missed Samori Toure on the deep pass at this point. I said, Matt LaFleur, this is your moment. It's time. It is your team. Is this your team or 12's? Because if it's yours, it's time for Jordan Love. So let me first of all say, this was not meant to be like a Rodgers is done, bench him forever, good riddance, get rid of him sort of tweet. It was in this moment, clearly Rodgers was not himself. He had cost the Packers arguably 24 points at that point, throwing a ball at a linebacker's helmet in the end zone that probably could have resulted in a touchdown had he just probably decided to run the ball, or had he thrown it better. And then you've got the throw to Bakhtiari, where stupid play call, but he's wide open at the same time, and Rodgers misses that. That's 14 off the board. Toure in the end zone, in my opinion, if he hits that, that's a touchdown. You could tell by his reaction, he knew it after as well. That's 21. And then on the Tunyon throw, even if they don't probably gain much more yards, you're at least in field goal range, right? So like even just not doing anything is probably 3 points. So that's 24 points off the board at that point. He just wasn't himself in that game. And it had seemed up until that point that LaFleur had sort of bended his will as much as possible to Aaron Rodgers to be able to go out and chuck the ball around and do his thing. And it wasn't working against the worst team in football. And Rodgers was literally keeping the Lions in that game. So at that moment, a couple things. I thought in that game specifically, it was time for something different. And I think had it not been MVP, 2-time MVP, 4-time MVP, Aaron Rodgers, like if you're just looking at it in that moment, I think you're probably going a different direction. Was it going to happen? No, probably not. Definitely not. But I think the other thing is, and I tweeted this after the game too, no matter what you think of 12, and clearly, let's just be blatantly clear. When you're trying to win that game, there's 0% doubt that Aaron Rodgers gives you the best chance to win that game, the remainder of that game. There's no way Jordan Love's just going to come in and be like, whoop, he's all of a sudden tearing it up and throwing touchdown passes all over the place. This is not going to happen. This team's not good enough for Rodgers. It's not going to be good enough for Jordan Love. That has nothing to do with it. We can come to the conclusion at this point that barring a ridiculous miracle, the Aaron Rodgers window for the Green Bay Packers is shut and probably slammed shut. So at this point, when you have opportunities in games where things aren't going your way, Rodgers' thumb is bothering him, etc., do you not just go ahead and take a look at Jordan Love when you have the chance and say, you know what, we're going to do something different. We're going to run the offense that Matt LaFleur wants to run, and we're going to live and die with that. And that was my thinking in the moment. Maybe wrong. It was no disrespect to Rodgers. He's top 2 quarterback of all time and arguably greatest Green Bay Packer of all time. I would probably lean Bart Starr over, but certainly in the conversation. And if you want to go Aaron Rodgers, I certainly wouldn't argue against you. He has saved this franchise from a lot of 3-14, 3-13 seasons. I have nothing but respect for Aaron Rodgers, the football player. And it was hard to watch this game because you never wanted to see a game in which Aaron Rodgers is costing you a game against a really bad team to the degree that Aaron Rodgers was costing the Packers the game in this one. Were things great around him? No, we've covered all of that through the entirety of this Q&A. Like I said, GM hasn't been great. Coach hasn't been great. Scheme hasn't been great. Defense hasn't been great. Defensive coordinator hasn't been great. And I'm being very kind and saying hasn't been great. They've all been bad, all of them. So this is not just a 12 thing. The point, this is not a Love is better than Rodgers. I hate Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers is done. Rodgers is toast. Is none of that. It's just at some point, if the Rodgers window is in fact closed, you have to say, hey, do we at least see if there's a Jordan Love window? Because like you can make a strong argument that the best thing that you can do with the remaining games in this season is to see if a Jordan Love window is actually a thing that exists. It probably doesn't, if we're being real, but I don't think we can slam that shut for sure either until we give him more than a game and a half a game in which they weren't even trying to win and had the players in that they needed to compete in that game anyway. One game in which he had to be, thrown to the wolves on the road in Kansas City, and they did a really poor job of game planning for that game. Like, I don't think we can have a full understanding of what Jordan Love is as a quarterback, and he showed actually some flashes in preseason. So you can make a strong argument that the best thing you can do with the remainder of this season is to evaluate Jordan Love and be like, hey, is there anything there? And if not, then again, when you're going, if you do decide to go nuclear and rebuild this team, you would love to have the information at your disposal to make the decision of, okay, because you don't want that to happen. Like, you don't have to have that happen next year, right? The worst is if you go nuclear and then Rodgers is gone, but now you have to see what Love can do next year. And you realize, oh, okay, he doesn't have it as well, when you could have learned that in 2022. So it's unrealistic in all probability. And again, I'm not calling for that to happen now. I don't think Love should just all of a sudden start next year and be the quarterback for the remainder of the season. Rodgers deserves the ability to play out more of this, at least until, like I said earlier, and until they're out of the playoff picture entirely. But yeah, that was my thought in the moment. It was not a disrespect to Aaron Rodgers. He's, like I said, arguably, I think, top 2 quarterback of all time and an insanely important person in the history of the Green Bay Packers. So not a disrespect to Aaron Rodgers at all. I think we had one more super chat come in. Is the organizational restructure of head coach GM both answering to the president partially to blame for the current disconnect? Tough to say. I mean, only people in the building would actually know that. It doesn't, like, I haven't seen any hint. And usually, at least where, like, it's not like I have sources or people within the team, but I'm usually close enough to people that are where I start hearing rumblings of this stuff. I haven't heard any rumblings of anything where there's disconnect between Goody and LaFleur or anything like that. I have heard things where there was a differing of opinions on what the Packers should have done this last offseason, if they should have continued with Rodgers or not. I did hear there were differences of opinions on that, but like, of course it's going to happen, right? Like, try putting 20 people together in a room and getting them to agree on anything in 2022. Like, it's just not going to happen. So if you're talking about, the future of the Green Bay Packers and whether or not they should do something with Aaron Rodgers, of course, there's going to be some differing of opinions on what they should do this past offseason, especially if it was the fact that the Broncos were willing to offer the deal that they were. So I haven't heard anything about that. And I think Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur are both extremely smart people, and it just hasn't worked out. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes, as Matt LaFleur likes to say, that's the cost of doing business. And both of them will know, like, every GM and every head coach is hired to eventually get fired in this business. Unless you're a Bill Belichick, at some point you're probably getting fired, right? So they know the stakes. Listen, Brian Gutekunst has been with this team since what? I know longer than Aaron Rodgers has been. Like he's been to this team as a scout and everything else for an insanely long period of time. He probably knew when he took the GM job that like he went from being a shoe-in to probably be with the franchise for just about forever to like at some point this probably comes to an end because everyone gets fired at some point in the NFL. It's just the business. So they both know, both LaFleur and Gutekunst know that if things don't turn around and if things don't get better, they are both like, as an NFL coach and GM, you are always on the hot seat. Whether you're on the hot seat or not, you are always on the hot seat. And as soon as things start going to crap, anything's possible. So Goody and LaFleur are both going to feel this a lot. And they're both going to have to work together regardless of how they're feeling or whether what's to blame. If it's the president, anything, like they're both going to have to answer to this and figure out a way to be successful moving forward. And to whoever it was that tweeted it earlier, like, yes, it is just a 5-game losing streak. It is a extremely painful 5-game losing streak at this point. But it's a 5-game losing streak in a stretch of 4 seasons where they've won a lot of football games, made it to the playoffs in 3 consecutive seasons, and deserve at least a small benefit of the doubt for what they have the ability to do moving forward. So we shall see from there. All right. A lot of Vikings fans in here. I know you guys don't get to cheer about much very often, so enjoy your time right now. I can't wait to see how Kirk Cousins blows things in the playoffs for you guys. It's probably going to be our Packer fans' favorite moment for the remainder of this season. So don't let us down. We know you won't. We know you've still got a couple really awesome choking moments coming up through the remainder of the season. So we'll be watching. Don't worry. That'll still happen. Guys, thanks so much for being here. Like I said, we've had 350-ish people in here almost the entirety of this time. So I know it's a struggle right now. I know it sucks. Support your people who you follow on Twitter and the people who are covering the team, because trust me, this sucks for them too. It doesn't make their job any easier. I know people like to think if it bleeds, it leads, and everyone's like, nah, I promise you it's not all fun and games when things aren't going well around the team. So make sure to appreciate those that you enjoy listening to and that are covering the team. Stay positive. Like I said, it's all part of the journey, all super part of the process, and hopefully things start getting better before they get worse. All right, last one on Culture Barbarian. Thanks again. With as much money as they had tied up to 12, this isn't an easy fix. The contract really hamstrings you going forward. Totally agree. Like I said, it probably is going to get worse before it gets better. Thanks so much, everyone. Appreciate you all. I'll be right back here tomorrow with Alex Strofe and Perry Goldstein. We're going to be recording later tonight to break everything down. So you can check that out on YouTube as well as wherever you get your favorite podcasts. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go. And please, 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 please make sure to vote if you're not registered. I don't know if you can still get registered. I'm assuming you can. I know you can in person, but either way, go vote. Make it happen. Love you guys. Talk soon.